Iran has a rich history and is one of the oldest civilizations on Earth. From the glory days of Cyrus the Great to the current conflict with Israel, Persia, or modern-day Iran, has been a cradle of empires, religions, and rebellion. Now, as headlines flash about coordinated strikes on its top nuclear sites at Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan by Israeli aircraft, followed up by US B-2 bombers and Tomahawk cruise missiles, Iran finds itself at another pivotal moment. Given the name Operation Midnight Hammer, the attack was declared a monumental success by U.S. leaders, while the United Nations watchdog warns of potentially very significant damage. This is the uncensored journey of one of the world's oldest civilizations, still shaping headlines today. What is the history of Iran? How did it evolve politically and culturally? How did Iran become the world's greatest pariah state? Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, former history professor, Army and Marine Corps veteran, and welcome to this episode of Forgotten History. Long before Persia hit the map, the Elamites ruled the southwestern plateau around 3000 BC. But things really took off with the Achaemenid Empire in 550 BC, founded by Cyrus the Great, becoming the largest contiguous empire the world had ever seen up to that time, stretching from Greece to India. Persia would fight many wars against the Greek city-states as well as the Romans, but this was the empire that invented the concept of human rights, at least on clay tablet. Darius the Great built a political and social infrastructure and bureaucracy that following empires replicated. But then came Alexander the Great, who torched Persepolis and shattered Persian dominance in 330 BC. Next up, the Parthians, who created their empire within ancient Persia. Think of them as mounted guerrilla warfare masters, riding circles around Roman legions. And the Romans decided that their expansion would end along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. The Persians gave way to the Sasanians, who brought back Persian pride and Zoroastrianism. For 400 years, from 224 to 651 AD, they were Rome's arch-enemy in the east, until the Arab-Muslim conquest in 651 changed the game forever. The Arabs then conquered Persia, but Persia conquered Arab culture. In the 7th century, when many non-Arabs, such as Persians, entered Islam, they were recognized as mawali, or clients, and treated as second-class citizens by the ruling Arab elite until the end of the Umayyad Caliphate. During this era, Islam was initially associated with the ethnic identity of the Arabs and required formal association with an Arab tribe and the adoption of the client status of mawali. Centuries of ethnic unrest would only get worse between rival Islamic groups. The Samanid dynasty of 819 to 999 AD, which followed, led the revival of Persian culture, but also periodic wars against the Byzantine Greeks as well as conflict with the Ottomans, who fought against both groups, but the contacts with the other cultures would have an unexpected benefit. The Ghaznavid dynasty, which followed and lasted until 1186, expanded Persian and Islamic knowledge and influence into northwest India, which would later establish the strong Muslim culture in India, which lasts to this day, as well as that which is today called Pakistan. But then came Genghis Khan and the Mongols in the 1200s, and see our video on Genghis. They burned, butchered, enslaved, and then settled down. But Genghis was followed by Tamerlane, another brutal invader, who turned cities into bone pyramids, almost destroying the Persian culture. He had invaded Iran and eventually conquered most of it by 1381. As a result of all of these conflicts, ideas were exchanged. Persian scientists, poets, mathematicians, and administrators built the Islamic Golden Age. Think of such great men as Avicenna, Rumi, and Omar Khayyam as the major influencers who expanded thought and culture. Persia at this time was a center of higher learning, technology, and enlightenment far beyond what Europe was experiencing. Following the rise of the Black Sheep Turkmen replacing the Timurids in 1452 and their being replaced by the White Sheep Turkmen in 1468, the culture grew exponentially. In 1501, The Safavid dynasty took over, which gave Iran a new identity, Shia Islam. Their dynasty lasted until 1736. Shia Islam is still the official religion today. They went toe-to-toe with the Sunni Ottomans and built a cultural capital at Isfahan. For centuries, the Shia Persians confronted the Sunni Ottoman Empire, which failed to completely encroach upon and conquer Iran or the majority of Arabia, which was also majority Sunni. Fast forward to the Qajars in the 1800s. Weak kings, strong beards. They lost a lot of territory to the Russians and got played like a fiddle by the British. When oil was found, suddenly everyone wanted a piece of Persia. The 1906 Constitutional Revolution tried to fix the mess with democracy. Spoiler alert, it didn't. In 1925, Reza Shah took power, a secular strongman. He modernized Iran with steel and censorship. His son, the infamous Mohammad Reza Shah, continued the modernization and the crackdowns. During World War II, the Iranian government was pro-German, and the British and Soviets both invaded and destroyed the small Iranian army. The British then had a major influence in Iran, as the region was a staging and training area for Allied forces preparing to deploy to North Africa, as well as a major conduit for Lend-Lease aid going to the USSR. After the war, the democratically elected Prime Minister Mossadegh tried to nationalize Iran's oil, which was supported by the parliament. British Prime Minister Clement Attlee considered seizing the Abadan oil refinery by force, but instead settled on an embargo by the Royal Navy, stopping any ship transporting Iranian oil for carrying so-called stolen property. On his re-election as Prime Minister, Winston Churchill took an even harsher stance against Iran. Churchill and the Eisenhower administration decided in early 1953 to overthrow Iran's government due to fears of rising communist influence in the region. Their justification was not just the nationalization or theft of British and American property, but that Mossadegh was warming up to Nikita Khrushchev and the Soviets. With the Cold War starting to heat up, that was also a risk that could not be taken. As a result, the West placed more embargoes on Iranian oil exports. The CIA under Allen Dulles and CR video on him, and Britain's MI6 decided that was not a great idea, and they orchestrated a coup called Operation Ajax to remove Mossadegh and place the Shah in complete power, as he was very friendly to the West and foreign businesses. Following the ousting of Mossadegh, a new government under General Fazlollah Zahedi was formed, which allowed Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the Shah of Iran, to assume power and build a strong alliance with the West. That mistake would come back swinging many years later. However, Iran became the most prosperous, educated, secular, modern, and westernized Islamic country in the world. People had great freedoms. There were no religious police making sure Sharia law was enforced. Minorities were not really subjugated to much brutality. Women wore Western clothing and could drive cars and work with men. Men did not usually wear beards. Mosque attendance was not mandatory, although men and women were still segregated during worship. Foreign nations invested huge sums into the Iranian economy. Business flourished, especially oil and gas, and the people were relatively comfortable. But there was dissent among the religious faithful, and as a result, the Shah had a remedy. The Sabak, the Bureau for Intelligence and Security of the State, was created by the Shah in 1957. It was the Shah's secret police, and it had a brutal history of cracking down on anti-government revolutionaries. People disappeared or were often jailed, many being extreme anti-Western Islamists and communists. In 1979, the people finally rose up. Out went the Shah, in came Ayatollah Khomeini, and with him the Islamic Republic. See our video on the Iran hostage crisis. The Islamic Republic eliminated the democratic process and was established as a complete theocracy under Sharia law, and the nation is still run today by religious clerics. Iran, under Khomeini, embarked upon a policy of creating and supporting Islamic terrorist organizations, setting aside Sunni and Shia differences such as Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and later Hamas in Gaza and the Houthis in Yemen. They funded their activities around the world. Most of these were focused upon the Middle East, and see our video on the Beirut barracks bombing in 1983. The 1980s were dominated by an 8-year bloodbath with Saddam Hussein's Iraq versus Iran. 1 million casualties later, Iran survived, scarred and hardened. Following that disastrous war, Iran became militarily depleted. Iran was also a major supplier of weaponry, to include IEDs in Iraq and Afghanistan, supporting the Taliban and al-Qaeda during the long war on terror, costing over 1,000 American as well as many coalition lives and maiming many more. The greatest tensions in the region were fostered by Iran's continued proxy attacks against Israel over the decades. Alliances on both sides were challenged, and political maneuverings between Iran and the West failed to secure agreements that quieted the region down. In 2009, Iran experienced an unusual social movement known as the Green Movement. This was not an environmental protest, but was prompted by contested presidential election results, where election rigging has always been a staple of Iranian politics. The youthful desire for expression and reform and a collective wave of national political optimism rose. The majority of Iranians do not want the religious zealotry and stifling of individual freedoms. In fact, they launched a public revolt in which the United States failed to support. They were tired of suppression of free speech, mobile cranes traveling around hanging young girls for reporting their being sexually assaulted, and minority Arabs in Iran were often mercilessly persecuted along with the Kurds. Arab opposition to Tehran was manifested in the Iranian embassy hostage crisis in 1980, and please see our video on that. Due to long-standing sanctions against Iran, they had struggled to derive an income from their oil production until President Barack Obama gave them $1.4 billion in cash and refused to enforce sanctions. President Joseph Biden also gave money to Iran, billions, and allowed them to make billions of more dollars by not enforcing sanctions, which allowed Iran to fund their proxy terrorist organizations, resulting in Houthi attacks on shipping and Israel, and Hamas and Hezbollah attacks against Israel as well. President Donald Trump's first term crippled Iran's financial infrastructure, making them unable to support violence around the world, but that would change. President Joseph Biden also failed to maintain the UN sanctions and released those billions of dollars to Iran, which allowed them to recover financially, leading to their ability to fund terrorism, which included the October 7, 2023 attacks against Israel by Hamas and the continued funding of the Houthi terrorists in Yemen. Following President Trump's second term, the United States launched a series of precision strikes on Iranian nuclear sites in June of 2025, including key enrichment and centrifuge facilities near Natanz and Fordo. The operation was swift and deliberate, aimed at halting Iran's accelerating march toward a nuclear weapon. U.S. intelligence confirmed that Tehran had crossed critical thresholds in uranium enrichment, triggering what Washington deemed a necessary action to preserve regional and global stability. The strikes dealt a significant blow to Iran's nuclear infrastructure, setting back its program and sending a clear signal to both allies and adversaries. While the regime vowed retaliation, the message was unmistakable. The United States would not tolerate a nuclear-armed Iran, especially one that funds terror and openly calls for the destruction of its neighbors. So, since 1979, Iran has been a story of tension between reformers and hardliners, tradition and modernity, the people and the power. Their determination to achieve nuclear status, to include nuclear weapons, has been addressed, at least for now. Iran's failure to abide by the nuclear proliferation agreements, their pursuit of nuclear weapons while openly stating their desire to destroy Israel and the United States, their supporting Russia in the war against Ukraine, as well as their desire to impose Islamic law around the world, indicates that regime change must happen. With sanctions, uprising, and nuclear standoffs, Iran remains one of the most influential and volatile countries in the Middle East, if not the world. The reduction of their nuclear capability is only one step to reining in the rogue state. From mighty kings to revolutionary clerics, Persia's story isn't over. It's just waiting for the next chapter. Thank you for watching this episode of Forgotten History. If you liked what you saw, please click like, share, and subscribe. And if you would like to assist with the ever-increasing cost of production, please consider becoming a channel member and joining our Patreon page. Please check out our merchandise store. And thanks for watching.